Good morning. I'm Jeff Hammond, Executive Director at International Ground Source Heat Pump Association. Welcome to the September Dig Deeper webinar. This webinar is sponsored by Centennial Plastics. Centennial was one of our sponsors of the 2023 conference, and that was a gold sponsor benefit was to be sponsor of two of the IGSHPA Dig Deeper webinars. So we appreciate Centennial for their sponsorship, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started with our knowledgeable speakers today, I have just a few items to update everyone on with the latest IGSHPA news. So we do have one slot still available for Town Hall and Dig Deeper webinars for the remainder of 2024. We would love to hear from you, and that these are always well attended, a lot of great topics. So if you're interested in speaking for this last one in 2024, or you're interested in 2025 webinars, if you go to IGSHPA.org, you'll find a training and events button right on the home page. Go there and there's an abstract that you could submit as a speaker. So we'd love to hear from you. We have our annual conference coming up in March in Champaign, Illinois. We moved our conference back just a few months so that it's a spring conference instead of December. So this one is March 11th through the 13th, and we're working with Geothermal Alliance of Illinois on this conference. We are getting a lot of interest already. You'll notice from my graphic, only about 41% of the rooms are still available. Now, we do have other hotel spaces in Champaign, but the advantage of booking your room here is that you just walk down the hall and you're in the conference center. We have the whole conference area booked for the IGSHPA conference. Also, pricing for registration is early bird pricing through January 31st. We're accepting abstracts for speakers. We don't have the tracks defined just yet. So depending upon our abstracts, that will help us determine which speaking tracks there will be. We have sponsorship and exhibitor opportunities available, and also now conference program advertising. So this is in full swing. We're going to be anxious to see you in Champaign in just about 6 months now. We have a lot of sponsors already. There are still some spots available. This dashed line here is really good news. The Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office is going to be sending me their logo for this spot. So they just became a gold sponsor. Thank you very much to GTO. And you can see here we have quite a few sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. We couldn't do this conference without your support. But there are a few available if you're interested. Likewise, the exhibit hall is filling up quickly. You can see here we have quite a few exhibitors already. Still some 20 by 20, 10 by 20, and 10 by 10 booths left. And this year we have an outdoor exhibit area for heavy equipment. So check that out. We'd love to have drill rigs and excavation equipment and so forth. So it'll be a really good opportunity to show off your products and services. If you haven't seen our Geo Outlook magazine, you might want to check with us to make sure you're on the mailing list. You can contact info@igshpa.org to be on that mailing list. We just distributed July a couple of months ago, and our next issue is in January. This will be a really important issue because it'll be right before the conference. So if you're interested in writing an article or advertising, you'll want to contact us right away. The circulation just continues to increase. Not only do we have about 6,000 plus in our database, but with the BNP media, that's ACHR News, the Driller, Engineered Systems, so forth, we reach about 50,000 as an audience, and that continues to increase as this magazine goes out. So if you're not on the list, let us know. It's a great magazine. Also, if you haven't looked at the 2024 membership program, this was announced in January, and there were a lot of changes. If you're on the directory, you certainly are going to have more leads. And we've even added a new listing here for directory only, so that if you're not you don't have the budget today for a full membership, there is a directory only option. The key is being on that directory because that connects all of the various stakeholders together. More information is on the website. We have a couple new databases that we really need your help on. There's a project database, and there's a licensing and CEU requirements database. There's a form on there so that you can submit your projects and also submit information about state and provincial licensing and CEU requirements. This is just going to help grow our industry. So we could really use your participation in contributing to these two databases. These are phase 1 projects, which are essentially links on web pages. So phase 2 will be searchable databases, so that then you can just type in school and it'll give you all the schools and so forth. So we really could use some input on that. Also, we have a board of directors election coming up. Voting starts on October 15th. Today is the last day to submit your candidacy. And in this election, the candidate that is up for election is the distributor sector. So if you're a product distributor and are interested in running for the board, today's the last day to do that. And then voting starts on the 15th. If you want to check it out, just go to the About menu, select Board of Directors, and then click on the Board of Directors Election 2024. You'll find the directors that are running, the candidates that are running rather, and there's also a button on there that says Ask the Candidate, which is a great way to get to know these candidates. You can submit anonymously a question, and then that gets sent out to all the candidates, and those answers are posted on that same page. If you're looking for CEUs for renewal of your certification, if you would just send a chat message, include your email and name, and we will record those in the database. With the new member portal, you can log on and see what your status is, how many contact hours you have in your profile. There's also a new option. I guess it's not as new anymore. We've been doing this now for about a year. But if you're watching this as a recording, you can still get credits for your certification. Just include this webinar code when you send an email, and you will give you credit for watching the recorded webinar. If you're joining us live, don't worry about this. All we need is your name and email address. But if you are watching this as a recording, we'll need this to show that you've watched that particular recording. Some housekeeping. The presenters I will introduce here shortly. And once they are finished, I'll be reading any questions or comments that you might have that you key into the chat or Q&A. There are two locations I'll talk about here shortly and where you can key in questions. We have had some challenges with the chat. Some people can't access chat, and it may be a security issue depending upon your organization's setup with Teams. So if you do get a window that looks like this, just click OK. That lets you be active on the chat session. If for some reason you still can't enter anything in chat, then use this Q&A. And if that doesn't work, then I'll unmute your microphone and you can speak verbally. So we should be able to take your questions. Try chat or Q&A, and hopefully if that works, then we'll be in good shape. If it doesn't work, just raise your hand. I'll watch for the raised hands, and then I'll unmute your microphone. All right, one more slide, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So this is a disclaimer and potential conflict of interest for presenters at this webinar. The upcoming presentation represents the opinion of the presenter and does not represent any official position, opinion, or endorsement of any products or services by IGSHPA or its members. IGSHPA Town Halls and Dig Deeper webinars are for member updates and education on the latest information in the geothermal heat pump industry and are not meant to endorse one technology brand over another. It is the presenter's responsibility to disclose any conflict of interest or position that may arise in the content of the webinar. So with that, again, we thank Centennial for being our sponsor, and let me introduce our two speakers. We're thrilled to have Terry Proffer from Major Geothermal and Greg Kurtz, our technical director at IGSHPA. Terry Proffer has been involved in the ground source heat pump mechanical trade since 1992, after a career in as a petroleum geologist since 1979. His involvement in the industry started as a co-owner of a ground source heat pump wholesaler based in Billings, Montana, and began training with experienced mechanical contractors and loop installers, installing completed heat pump systems from the ground through the controls. He attended various industry schools for the design and installation of these systems, including courses taught at IGSHPA headquarters at the time, which was in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and various manufacturer training programs. Terry is a certified IGSHPA NATE installation trainer, one of 16 individuals approved as a certified GeoExchange designer trainer by IGSHPA for the Association of Energy Engineers, AEE, in the CGD certification program. He's trained over 700 contractors and engineers in this technology. Since 1992, Terry has designed and peer-reviewed over 400 ground source heat pump systems for commercial, municipal, institutional, and military facilities in the lower 48 states, Alaska, and internationally, exceeding 19,500,000 square feet of conditioned space, utilizing approximately 39,000 nominal tons of heat pump capacity. This excludes residential and large custom homes of 10,000 to 50,000 square feet. He's increasingly engaged in forensics and construction defect litigation involving ground source heat pump mechanical systems. His largest ground heat exchanger design to date is for the 360,000 square foot IKEA store in Merriam, Kansas, utilizing a vertical closed loop comprised of 160 boreholes at 600-foot depth, in operation since the fall of 2014. So we're thrilled to have Terry here with this wealth of knowledge for sure. Greg Kurtz has over 40 years of experience in the ground source heat pump industry, including positions at Climate Master, Intertech, FHP Bosch, GeoFlow, and Water Furnace, as well as owning and operating an HVAC contracting business in Ohio. His most recent position at PoolPack provided great insight into specialty application that ties in nicely with the work needed at IGSHPA. As technical director for IGSHPA, Greg is involved in all training courses and technical resources that are in development by IGSHPA for the ground source heat pump industry. He's currently working with IGSHPA training committees and CSA group on developing curriculum that will help with workforce development, growth of the industry, and new training that will support the latest design installation standards and best practices. So with that, I am thrilled to have our two speakers, and let me just switch over to a web page so that you can see what they're talking about. All right, I'll turn it over to you guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully you can see that web page.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the introductions, and thanks for all of you in the audience this morning that are tuning in. Looks like we have a pretty good group here, so hopefully we can enlighten you a little bit about this new webinar training course that we've come up with. It could even be done in person, I suppose, but I'll let you know, I guess, a little background on how this got started. Back in earlier part of this year, Terry had gotten an inquiry from some connections at the GSA organization that work with the federal government, and they wanted to know more about ground source heat pump systems. They had done some projects with ground source heat pumps, but apparently they felt they didn't know enough and they weren't all working like they had hoped. So they wanted him to do kind of an update on ground source heat pumps, just as a kind of high level overview to get the better concept for all the staff of how they work. So he did that, and I think that went off fairly successful. And it actually kind of turned back around again like a boomerang, and they wanted to know more. So when that happened, the one of the contacts at the GSA reached out to IGSHPA actually and was soliciting some additional training for ground source heat pumps. And when they got to IGSHPA, of course, they came to me and I asked them questions. And I'm like, okay, what do you know? What are you really wanting to know more about? And right early in the conversation, they mentioned that Terry had done a little introduction of ground source heat pumps. And so I'm like, oh, perfect. I don't need to ask you a whole lot more questions. Terry will fill me in on the details, and we'll put something together for you. So that was, I don't know, the July, August timeframe of this year. That happened after the April timeframe when he had done the overview. So I got a hold of Terry. We talked, and we said, well, this is good. We'll come up with a good next step process to help them, because what they were really looking for were some inputs to help them pick a good design team and put together proposals for a request for their projects, as well as understanding, all those intricate steps that go along with a ground source heat pump project that may be causing them problems and issues. So that's kind of how this got started. And then we actually did the first run with them on this beginning part of this month. And they had over 70, almost 80 some people in the audience that we educated at GSA about this course. And the feedback seemed to be really good. They really liked the material we presented with them. And so we're going to try to cover, I guess, today some of those topics that are in the course and what it might answer for a lot of people, what we find in the general public who are looking to get, more help on ground source heat pump projects. With all the move to use electrification and decarbonization in the climate today in United States as well as Canada and other parts of the world, there's a lot of people that are learning about heat pumps that aren't sure on ground source what they need to know and how to get a successful team together or a project together that comes out successfully. They just are in a learning. This, I think, course content is going to really help open the doors for those lay people who maybe outside of our direct industry who want to know more about it. And so that was the intent of this course, was to really help them understand the importance of picking a good construction team, the members that should be on it, learning the technical and financial things that are involved to make it a successful ground source heat pump project, and really figure out who's got what roles involved in the system and installation so that they can properly specify that out into their plans and their request for the project, and then develop and specify concise project documents that really help the bidders who are going to look at this building owner's project needs and be able to come up with a good number and a good project that comes off the ground day one successful, instead of finding at the end of the day there are still hiccups and problems they didn't know about that added conflicts and problems as they went. So it kind of helps smooth things out. So those were really the objectives, to educate them about those kind of things. Terry, you want
Yeah,
to add anything to that? Go ahead.
yeah, and a great introduction and the overview of how this came about. Um, and it occurred to me that, when GSA asked us about this, I asked them, I said, so do you have systems that are not working right? And they said, well, here's the problem. We have a lot of facilities with ground source heat pump systems that work perfectly. And we have a lot more that are problematic. And we don't even know where to start to do maintenance or correct these issues or anything. And my question back to them was, have you contacted your design team? Yeah, and we're not getting any feedback to where we can get started. On a few they did. They had some that the design team became engaged and helped work things out. And there was problems, everything from bad control sequence of operation to simple things like improper setback, to more serious things where the heat pumps would not stay online. They were locking out for various reasons. So anyways, I started thinking about this a little more, and I do a lot of forensics and peer review. So unfortunately, I do forensics on problematic systems, which those in the industry, we'd rather not have those. But on the peer review, I find a lot of, especially with newer design teams, that they don't know what they need to know yet. They haven't taken a CGD course. They haven't allied with a experienced geo junkie, lack of a better term, to kind of get them going on their first couple ground source heat pump jobs. And due to here in the U.S., since we have these federal incentives that are really driving the market right now, uh, coupled with some local areas where you have state and utility incentives, we're seeing a lot of design teams with no experience diving into this industry. And they don't have bad intentions, they just don't know what they need to know. So we're starting to see some problematic installations out there. So I started thinking about this a little more, and got started working with Greg. But just a couple of examples, recent examples. I was engaged to do a peer review. The project was for a resort area in Aspen, and fairly good sized resort facility. And they said, yeah, we'll share all of our documentations, but we're getting RFI'd to death by the drilling contractor. And I said, what kind of RFIs? Well, they emailed them all to me, and I said, wow, yeah, you guys are getting RFI'd to death. And when I saw the drawings, there was good reason. These were 100% construction documents, and just as an example, their ground loop site plan showed dots around the job site, and that was it. There was no headering schedule. There was no coordination on anything, and these were 100% design documents. And so, anyways, I went through everything. Public put out about a 10-page response back to the developer, who was the client, about what we need to identify and get resolved. So we had a visit with the virtual call with the engineering team, and the engineer told me, he said, when I asked about where's the headering schedule, and how are you linking all these boreholes, how many holes per header pair, and I was told, well, that's means and methods, that's not our job. And I said, really? And so the driller had some really good legitimate RFIs on this. And when I heard that, then I said, or asked, well, you've got a circulation pump of so much horsepower, so you must have done a pressure drop on the loop field. How did you do that without a headering schedule? And all you could hear was crickets on the other side of the phone. So anyways, that was one example recent. And by the way, we did help get that resolved. Looking at another project right now where they haven't started construction yet, and did a peer review at the request of the client school district, and because their construction team had some questions on the drawings, and one of the things was why so many holes at 500 foot, and their TC test was at 300 foot. So we started seeing conflict after conflict after conflict on this thing. And I said, so what's your objective for entering water temperature to the heat pumps? What's the minimum, maximum expected limit water temperatures to the heat pumps? And the design team couldn't tell us that. I also noticed that most of the ground source heat pump systems were not extended range rated, and there was no backup boiler or cooling tower on this thing. So no one knew how the thing was going to work. No one had done any simulations on the ground loop, or at least they didn't share it with me. They did everything wrong about their TC testing. They didn't even understand what the purpose of a TC test was, and what the values reflected. For example, they didn't realize that the thermal conductivity value on a vertical borehole is an average over the length of that hole. So if you've got a 300 foot test, it may not have the same values as, say, for a 500 foot test. So there was all kinds of missing links on this project, and it had a recipe for that would be a possible problem. Again, the engineer he wasn't setting out to do anything bad. He just didn't know what he needed to know. So I started going back and realizing we as an industry have a lot of these types of systems out there that the client didn't know who to pick, or they didn't know how to shortlist people based on their experience or their technical abilities. So anyways, that gave us more impetus to put together this seminar, primarily for architects, general contractors, anyone that's going to decide on who to pick for a design team to design the ground source heat pump system. And this is really more for commercial scale projects, not necessarily residential. But I think there are some things in this that could help on the residential side as well. So I'll turn it back over to Greg, and if he wants to throw in some more information here.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, that sounds good, Terry. Good explanation on some of the reasonings that you've seen in the field from folks that really need to know more and why they need to know more. So I think those are good examples that just kind of solidify. There's a lot of people looking at our technology today. So we wanted to build this course that hopefully can short circuit some of those problem potentials and give people, a really good recipe for success. So let me just go right into an overview of the topics that are in this course that we talk about. And we're going to do the high level talk about them so you have an awareness of what's in this course. And then, there's more details obviously when you take the course, the webinar seminar, and you're going to learn about that. But we have 7 key main topics that we put into this. And as Terry and I go forward, we might revise this some more. We'll see. I'm sure we're all going to learn more as we go about what people need. But I think these 7 keys are going to be really good. So on a high level, the top 7 topics in this will be number 1, building a RFP and the project information. What somebody as a building owner is going to put together to put out there to get proposals and quotes to help people understand what to bid on and what's going to be required in that project. Maybe how long that time frame is going to be and any kind of expectations the owner has. So putting together an RFP and the project information is one of the topics we spend some time on. The second topic in the course is going to be more on selecting a mechanical engineer to kind of orchestrate the whole project for the owner. So we've got, a section on selecting a mechanical engineer because everybody doesn't have the ground source heat pump expertise that might be needed. So it was kind of help people know more about what to look for when they're doing that and selecting an engineer. The third topic in the course is going to be regarding preliminary ground source heat exchanger site planning. So, they may have a piece of property and they're not sure where to put the ground loop at or how much space is going to be required to put a ground loop in. This topic is going to answer a lot of those questions and help them understand what they don't understand on the preliminary design. And of course, it's just what it is. It's a preliminary design that you start with, and we're going to learn some information as we move forward on the project about how to develop a final ground heat exchanger site plan. But there's a lot of things there that I think would be very insightful for somebody to understand on, that big question, because that's usually the biggest area of question people have on geothermal heat pumps is the ground loop side. So we have a good topic there for the ground source heat exchanger site planning.
Yeah, and
And
we're
then,
not going to get in. I want to just interrupt here on one thing. One of the big deals on pre-planning a system is everyone wants budget numbers, and they want to throw a swag at the cost of a ground loop. Well, the preliminary design allows for soft costing. It may be a worst case, but at least you can get an idea. And I'm not meaning to go on a rabbit hole here and get us off track on our topic discussion, but on all the RFPs I've seen here lately from architects, municipalities, whatever, they don't when they've asked me about where they're short on and why they've had issues, no one involved, no one required this preliminary site plan planning. They might ask the GC to go out and do a TC test, and they don't even have an engineer on board that's done a preliminary load calculation to determine a loop field size. So they pick all the wrong parameters, et cetera, et cetera. So preliminary site planning, when you're selecting a design team, is really important. That team needs to understand how to do a preliminary layout before they get very far along, which also allows you to find conflicts with utilities and other infrastructure, and get that avoided early in the design process. And it's a key thing that we're seeing is missing in these RFPs.
okay. And yeah, so then just as Terry said, the next topic in the course is the thermal conductivity testing. So that's another big question mark. A lot of folks, unfamiliar with ground source heat pumps need to have some more knowledge on. So we've got a whole lesson plan just on thermal conductivity testing to kind of educate them on how to figure out that formation that's there at the property and what parameters to use for sizing the ground loop preliminarily, and deciding how many boreholes that's going to be required, maybe what the average conductivity and soil type is on the site to help with a final design, as well as familiarizing them with that the C448 standards, which is an ANSI CSA IGSHPA standard, has some good guidelines for TC testing of boreholes, and that really need to be incorporated into the project, and to make sure that you're going to get a good layout and good design and good test. So we kind of educate them on all those steps and processes involved with thermal conductivity, so they have an understanding when they hire people or specify people and project test what they need to know, and get that built into that information. And then the fifth topic that's in the course is going to talk generally about equipment and the controls for the project. So it's going to help them determine, what ground source heat pump equipment sizing would be needed for the building and the loads in the building, and trying to decide, if and what any additional controls might be necessary or desired for the equipment in the building. But Terry will probably speak up heavy on this, that the units really don't need complicated BAS control systems to operate correctly. So you could just use heat pumps in their standard controls in most cases, and it would be fine. But as we know, building owners sometimes want energy management systems on their buildings, and they start getting complicated controls. So we do talk about that, and the desire to get them to try to incorporate open language protocols if they're going to be doing that. So there's a lot of information there on the equipment controls in general, but go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of the forensics we do on problematic systems are not related to a bad ground loop or improper selection of heat pumps. It's usually controls related, probably the majority of the problematic systems. And one of the problems we see is they may have a good reason for having a building automation system, but it is over controlled and no one understands it. And what we find is the engineer of record, who may have wrote the original sequence of operation, wasn't involved with the controls contractor, and the controls contractor might not have understood things. He didn't even know when to ask a question. So they said, oh, we'll treat it like a boiler cooling tower system. Wrong. So for an RFP, we really urge that the client, whoever is selecting that team, they need to emphasize in their RFP that they want to see that engineer. If he's writing the controls protocols, they need to be involved with validating that the controls are working as intended during contract administration and startup.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Back to you, Mr. Greg.
All right. So then the sixth topic out of the 7 that are in the lessons would be the actual ground source heat exchanger installation and the coordination of that. So once they kind of have things laid out in the preliminary side and the job moves forward, they're going to need to understand what it takes on the installation side and how to coordinate that. So here we talk about, that layout, how to make it compatible with the site and the considerations that are going to be on the site. Maybe you got to work around those utilities or right-of-ways for different entities that might need to cross the property, any kind of variables, that might be there. So things that are needed to be known on the coordination and compatibility with the site are really discussed in the installation and coordination lesson, as well as a plan for making quality assurance with that installation. Because, you can have somebody put something in, but if there's no quality along the way, they can check the box that they installed it, but you could end up with a problem job because they were maybe poorly watching quality issues that can really creep up on you. And you don't want to bury a problem on a ground loop, obviously. That's kind of a problem. So we talk about the requirement and need for some plan of quality assurance in that design and installation that keeps people out of problems. So there's a lot of things there that we try to discuss and open up for people to understand, as well as the requirement and necessity for site visits that kind of go right along with that quality assurance program. Is you should probably have in your design some maybe scheduled site visits as the design is being installed, both planned visits as well as, maybe more importantly, I'm sure Terry will have some comments on this, is a random site visit. Maybe just go there when they weren't planned and see how things are going in the real world when the supervisors aren't around. So, that's really probably just as important, because you want to make sure that the teams that are doing these jobs are doing it the same way all the time, so that nobody has a problem afterwards. And so that's a pretty critical thing, I think, is to have them understand that planned site visits and inspections are good, but it's okay to do some random stuff too. Terry, do you have something on that?
Yeah, in fact, I see most projects where they have problematic parts of the system, especially with the ground loop, that the people that designed the system never showed up during the installation. They had no verification requirements for like pressure testing, purging. In fact, I'm finding a lot of engineering teams in their specs, they'll say purge to 2 feet per second, but most engineers don't know how to calculate the minimum purge rate for a ground loop. And so what makes you think that a driller can do that? Well, a lot of drillers can, but you're trusting that to means and methods. So I get a lot of engineers that say, well, yeah, we shouldn't have to worry about that's means and methods. And I said, if you don't understand the means and methods, then why are you trusting that to others, and you're allowing the general contractor to maybe, lack of a better term, bottom feed the lowest cost bidder, and maybe that low cost bidder, maybe they are competent, but what if they don't know how to do those things? So my point is to design teams, if you don't understand field operations, you can leave things to means and methods, but you better know how to figure them out on your own. And that involves making site visits to make sure your system's going in the way you planned it to.
Okay.
Well, this is great discussion. You guys really have a handle on what's needed in this industry. We already have some comments and questions if you guys want to start taking those. Also, maybe we want to look at how to schedule this class. Can you remind us, Greg, what the course is called and
Sure.
and how they might go about scheduling it?
Okay. All right. Sure. So the course again is called Selecting the Ground Source Heat Pump Team. And we're going to take scheduling requests for that through our website. So if you go to the IGSHPA.org website, we have a training and events area there, and you can find the listing of different trainings, and this course is listed on that. So we kind of set them up and schedule these courses on a demand basis. We need usually at least 10 people requesting a particular course to make it available at this moment. By the time we get an instructor and schedule it and set it all up, we trying to use our resources all wisely. We need like 10 people or so to make a class up, to do a seminar or webinar on that. So that's how they would do that.
And just to follow up on that, since we've been developing this, I've been kind of behind the background talking with a lot of architects, general contractors, facilities managers that I've met over the years. And a lot of them I've been involved with on forensics because they didn't have the right people on the team, or they had people that, like say, it wasn't intentional. They just didn't understand what they need to know. And I shared Greg's preliminary draft outline, and 100%, I've got these guys pinging me every day now. When are you going to put this webinar on? So I think it's going to blow up pretty good. And I feel like it's a missing link in our industry. I think The other thing is, I think it'll be an advantage to new engineering firms and designers that, you know, they're going to be vetted in more detail from people that are educated about selecting a design team, and hopefully they'll reach out, take a CGD course, ask for peer review from experienced gray-haired people in the industry, that sort of thing, because we're going to see our industry is really growing right now, not just now that we've got the federal incentives, but we're an accepted technology now. We're not a boutique industry like we have been in the past, for what people consider that. You know, we've got IGSHPA and ASHRAE standards. We've got the CSA 448. We have arrived, and we're competing routinely now with conventional systems, not as to be a boutique or green system necessarily, although that's part of it, but we're seeing that our clients are becoming more sophisticated, and they understand that a ground source heat pump system really is to their benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of great topics. I think you said 7, Greg. And,
I had one last one, Jeff, I didn't get out. Let me just say it, and then we can take further questions. That way I'll get all 7 topics out there. So the 6th topic was the ground source heat exchanger installation and coordination. And then the last one is contract administration and quality assurance. So that's the last one, which kind of puts everything together to, you know, summarize what people are going to need to know when they select a team, specify a project, and lay it out, and actually are in the process of doing the job. This is going to educate them about that whole last segment to really put the package together and hopefully make it come off, you know, without a hitch. So now we have the 7 topics covered.
Just to underscore what Greg just said, in 2014, I was at an ASHRAE conference in Seattle, and they had a ground source heat pump track. And I put together a presentation on contract administration. And I had all kinds of slides and examples of, you know, contaminated loops and everything. But before I gave that presentation, we had like, I don't know, 50, 60 engineers in the room. And I said, okay, first off, guys, I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I do design a lot of these things, but I also make field site visits. And so of those 50 or 60 engineers in the room, I asked before I started the presentation, how many of you guys go out and do site inspections on the loop fields that you design? I had like 2 people raise their hand. And then after the presentation, and after I showed them the horror show of all the bad stuff that was going on out there, they were all going, yeah, I guess we need to get out there and take a look at things. And most of them were also saying, we just don't understand drilling operations. And I said, then you need to take an IGSHPA class. You need to go out there and visit sites. The drillers will talk to you. You know, you need to understand these things. So anyways, we see that as a big omission on the commercial side, where we don't have the design team involved in many times with the actual installation, putting eyes on it and boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that involves setting test standards and specs. Like I put out logs, like I want to see you guys fill out your pressure test logs. I want to see a purge report that each header pair had this much GPM, that sort of thing. And I'll go out and witness those things. And as Greg said earlier, I'll do a surprise visit. And so we're trying to educate clients. If you select a design team, these are the things you should expect out of that design team.
Thank you for that clarification, Terry. In fact, that was one of the questions that I had is, you know, maybe we can talk a little bit about what the objectives of this course are. It's not a substitute for CGD or for intensive training. We're really trying to figure out how to work with the best team. Could maybe you guys touch on that just a little bit? How long is the course, and who's our audience? What are we trying to accomplish here?
Well, I'd like to just interject. I think Greg can probably answer that better. But some of the feedback we've got, and I wanted to mention this before I lost my train of thought on it, is a lot of the feedback is that they wanted an example of us to take, maybe not in all the details, but just take the class through like 30 minutes of how a system is designed. So we're going to actually add 2 or 3 examples at a 50,000 foot level, load calculations, selecting equipment, pre-design, and final documents and specifications. So we are going to add that to the class because we think it, if the end user who's selecting that design team kind of understands that process, they don't have to know the details, but they need to know the high points. That's going to be a big part of this selecting a ground source heat pump team webinar.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up now.
Okay, good enough. Yeah, that's a great input. And so to the question of Jeff, how long would the course be? We intended it to be a 4-hour course. When we did it with the GSA, because there was so much involvement and activity and questions along the way, it stretched to 5 hours. And now that we've finished that one and we kind of see how it went, like Terry just said, we want to add even more things to it. So I think it's going to end up closer to 6 hours at least of material and training session time. The audience is going to be really designed for folks who are putting together a project and overseeing a project. That's the intent of it. But it can apply to a lot of different, people as well in the public. So if it wasn't just a building owner, it could be an engineering firm. What do we need to know to understand the overall way ground source heat pumps get installed and designed, and what can we do for quality assurance? It could work for them. It could work for construction consultant designers. It could work for mechanical contractors, even the ground loop people. I mean, I think almost any trade involved, and there's over at least 12 different jobs that are touched by a ground source heat pump system in the workforce area today, that they could all benefit from understanding what they don't understand about the overall process of the system and design, installation, or commissioning. So I think that's going to cover a lot of people. Although we started it for the GSA group, it's a great reason to use it for the public because there's a super need there for it. And I think it's going to help people understand when they go to hire or lay out a job, they want to look for people with IGSHPA credentials that have the CGD or the AI training that will have some real knowledge if they don't have physical experience yet, at least of what the basics should be to do this job correctly, and can use that as a guide. And of course, IGSHPA membership doesn't hurt along the way because this is, going to put them close to mentors like Terry and I and others that we know in this industry that can really guide them if they have questions along the way. So that's the intent.
I think one of the key target students we were looking for, a lot of commercial projects now engage, the client will engage a client rep, and this guy is going to be like the interface between the client and the general contractor and the design team, and that person is very important to the design and construction process. Well, that person is also going to be important if he's involved with the selection of the design team, and the client reps that I've been talking to are frothing at the mouth for us to get this thing online because they want it. And I've worked with a lot of client reps and educated them, and they understand the importance of everything we've been talking about. And they've steered a lot of projects away from train wreck status. And those are the guys we want involved with this training. And sometimes it's just the architect that does this. A lot of times it's a facilities manager for a school campus, that sort of thing. So anyone that's going to be making the decision and having to work with the design team, they're the folks that we want to take this class.
That's great. Well, you guys have certainly generated a lot of comments and questions while you've been talking. So I'm going to get to some of these. We have about 9 minutes left. Ruben has a comment here about some experience he's had about 15 years ago in British Columbia, Canada, with a geo association that he chaired. They developed a set of guidelines for owners and designers, which sound similar to the material that you guys are covering. So I'll reach out to Ruben and touch base. Janine has a comment about residential installations in Ontario in particular. They spring up during rebate periods and sometimes get no attention once a warranty's up. So having an expert in the area to take on multiple installations, but beyond their time and ability, sounds like it creates some issues. So I'll follow up with Janine as well. I think there's opportunity there. Ruben comments in his humble opinion, the current design resources, which are the IGSHPA manuals, don't provide a lot of clarity on proper controls and long-term operation or optimization. As you note, it's not analogous to other mechanical systems. It seems to be a bit of an IP for many established designers, but it's not disseminated to the industry. That's a risk for growth of the industry. And I think, Terry, you mentioned you were going to have some design application information added to this as well. This might be an opportunity for IGSHPA to come up with some guidance.
Absolutely. And one of the things we can rely on with IGSHPA, a lot of the work's been done for us. It's the ASHRAE design guide by Kavanaugh and Rafferty. And I believe Lisa Moline is working up with the new commercial design training program, and I think they're going to be touching on controls a little bit more, and that's not just design of commercial ground loops.
Very good point. Thank you, Terry. Mike has a question here. For higher cost, can this course be set up for a specific project, even if the number of attendees is less than 10? It's an interesting concept. More of a design guidance, I guess. What do you guys think about that?
Sure. I would think we're open to any financial opportunity to help get the training out there. So, send us the information details, and I think Jeff and I and Terry will look at it and see if it makes sense. We can work it out for you somehow. We want to help instrument, this information to the field somehow to help everybody so that we can, help everybody do a better job. So we have an open door to that. So we'll see. But the economics so far have worked out, we think, at least about 10 people. But I suppose, that's a variable, so we can look at it.
Well, and I think it fits into the purpose of this class, and that's to get systems out there that are not problematic, because we're growing, and the last thing we need is train wrecks out there that ruin our reputation. So yeah, if we can help on maybe a private seminar, absolutely. I think we or just offer guidance, and we can also hook people up through our business directory with IGSHPA. You can, if you need a 30-40 year veteran with the gray hair, we have the membership with IGSHPA that you can engage for peer review and guidance on your projects.
Very, very good points. Thank you. Ruben makes a comment. Much of this makes sense if you compare how other ground engineering is done, and his examples are geotechnical foundations, for example. So it sounds like we're heading in the right direction with that. Janine mentioned some guidelines in Ontario and is requesting that we have some simple guidelines for residential, at least, that are straightforward. And she took the courses, but there weren't actual examples. So I think that's an area where we'll see a lot of progress, especially with the new training programs, because they will have examples. You'll have to do a design in class for both the commercial and the residential, which is good. But for guidelines, the C448 standard, the ANSI CSA IGSHPA standard, those are minimum requirements. So that's something that I think is a great guidance for really commercial or residential, as far as what are needed to have successful quality installations. I don't know if Terry or Greg, you had any comments on that or not.
I think the CSA, when people dig into that, and if it's part of the design process, to at least consult with the CSA 448. I mean, I was the chair for the thermal conductivity test committee, and TC testing, just as one example, is rarely done right. I mean, a lot of times people go out and do a TC test. They can't even integrate the test hole in the operating loop field, even if it was the right depth and the right pipe size. So, you know, the CSA standards are going to be a huge help. The previous version, and I think was edited 2016 or 17, it had a lot of good information, but this new version, I don't know when the published date is going to be. Jeff can help us out, but it is really, really better. And every design team, client rep, et cetera, should have a copy of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking at January. We were hoping for December, but now we're looking at a January publication. So it's not far off on
Yeah.
that next edition for sure. We still have the 2016 edition available, which is really, really good. I guess the exciting thing about the next edition is it has so much more information, including district systems and energy piles and sewer waste heat recovery and that kind of thing. So there's just a lot more in it.
Sure. Well, what it'll also do, if you've got a design team that is a little bit new to the industry, if they read through that, that's going to motivate them to ask questions and figure things out a little bit better. I think that's I think a value of the CSA that's often lost, because you read through that and go, gosh, I didn't know that. Maybe I better ask questions about how we're doing this.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Ruben has a comment. Drillers often tell me while I'm dunking my hand in the grout tank, we've never seen the engineer come to site. Well, that sounds like a great opportunity to get in front of these guys.
Well, that's what the course is going to try to educate them. They need to get out and look at these jobs as they're going in. This is going to give them more confidence and understanding of the process, and make sure that the quality insurance is going to be done for the end client.
I see another offshoot of this selecting a ground source heat pump design team. The RFP to select the team is one thing, but then it's selecting your general contractor who's going to have the driller and everyone else as a subcontractor. So I'm just suggesting with IGSHPA training committee, Greg, that that might be something else to put on the board to consider in the future here. You know, how do you select your contracting team?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Tim has a question. This is for Greg. What happened to the third-party inspection course?
Oh, that is still out there. We have the geothermal inspector course that's still available. Go to our IGSHPA website training area, you'll find that link. Maybe Jeff can put it up there. But we still have the inspector course available. And actually, we talked about that. I didn't bring it out in our topics because we did a high-level overview. But in this course, we did talk about the inspector training that IGSHPA offers to help ensure that these jobs are being overseen with somebody that has some understanding of good processes versus bad. So that's certainly still available, and it's part of the course, actually.
Yeah, I just added that link to the chat so everybody can see that. All right, let me see here. Frank has a comment. Taking the course is cheap insurance for being able to write a knowledgeable scope of contractor work. So I think that's
Isn't
great.
that true?
Oh, good. Great point. Great point. We need to put that in our sales language, Greg.
Yeah. You know, if the cost of the training course is $350 to $500, I mean, it's probably a lot cheaper than fixing the problem after the fact, right? If you'd known what to look out for, you wouldn't have allowed it to happen, maybe. So, absolutely, very, very good point.
Well, being respectful of everyone's time, it is half past the hour. We do have more questions. Are you guys available to stick around just a little bit longer?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
And if you're not, you can email us. So info@igshpa.org will get us the question, and we can disseminate it accordingly.
Thank you. Yeah, Janine says the client rep is often the architect. I think that she makes a good point there as well.
Yes.
Adam says biggest challenges as a rep is preparing the client for the scale of drilling. You've had a lot of direct experience with that, Terry. Any thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. That's why the design team that is selected should have the ability to do a pre-design which involves making sure they get the hourly load calculations done. And we have a lot of clients saying, well, we don't want to pay for the hourly loads. Well, you're going to have to do the load calculations anyways. How else are you going to size your equipment, et cetera, et cetera? Now, an hourly load is a little more involved, but that also allows you to do a better operating cost analysis as well. So my remark to that is that design team, and they don't need a TC test if they know what they're doing. In fact, you don't want to run a TC test until you've done a pre-design for a lot of reasons. But the big value of that pre-design is you've laid it out on a site plan, you've identified conflicts like utilities and other infrastructure have to be avoided, how you're going to header it up. So now the client can see the scope, but there's another value. That pre-design is a worst case, which, by the way, the TC test parameters drop out of that, or should. So now you can go out and get costing from qualified loop installation contractors to get preliminary cost ranges for your budget that have some meat on them and they're defensible. What we see is a lot of projects, people say, oh, 400 foot per ton or 5, whatever. And, you know, they haven't even done a load and they assign 1 ton for 300 feet of square feet or whatever. That's not the right way to do it. You need, the loads are going to have to be done anyways. So do them right. Should be the earliest thing done up front, as we emphasize in this RFP process, because so much value drops out of those load calculations, and one of which is you can do a pre-design on that loop field and get the client is now aware of the size and scope as a worst case and what the cost of that thing's going to be.
Thank you, Terry. Jack has a really good comment here. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times. I would recommend everyone in this webinar join the business directory. That's the place that potential end users and clients can go for business development initiatives. I think Jack makes a really good point there. Mark has a question. Does the course include a detailed level of preliminary engineering info needed for a delegated design type project procurement option? For instance, peak load or connected equipment versus annual profiles.
I think that's one of the things we think we're going to add into the course. We're trying to balance that type of thing for the client to understand. That's got to be part of the, you know, it has to be addressed in the RFP requirements. The problem with what we're dealing with is, as Greg alluded to, we started out at a 4-hour seminar, and, you know, this thing can be blown up to 2 days if we had to, but no one wants that. We want to try and keep it concise, but we are going to be adding in at a high level the design process, because a lot of the clients just don't understand that process, and they're going to need to understand that for the RFP if they have no experience with this. This is why I say we want client reps to really take this class, because whether they're the architect or a third-party client rep, that's going to be very important for them to put in as a requirement on the RFP, that the engineering team know how to do those preliminary loads.
Really good point. Really good point. We have some other comments here about the ground heat exchanger is a field assembly, so it requires real thought. Kind of like designing a makeup air unit in the past. Now it's a complete product. So I think that's a great comment.
Absolutely.
For sure. Also, Janine makes a comment about the need for information from municipalities on a CSA standard, and that's something that we definitely need to work on from an educational standpoint. I believe Janine may be in Canada, so that is part of the building code, the C448 standard in Canada, and that might be just an education opportunity with local municipalities to remind them that it is in the building code. And we have another comment here. Load calculations also lead into distribution involving radiant floor, for example, and so that must be factored into heat pump capacity, which I completely agree. So I think we've done a great job of communicating this, guys. Thanks so much for your time. We're a bit over time, so we probably should wrap up. I appreciate your expertise and your willingness to discuss this new course. The recording will be on the website probably the next couple days. So by Monday or Tuesday, you should see the recording, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to schedule a course. Thanks again, Terry and Greg, and everybody have a wonderful weekend.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.